Hi, welcome to Gabby Talks. My name is Gabby, and today I will be talking about the most important people in history from 1450 to 1648. We're going to start off strong with Lorenzo de' Medici, and he was very influential in the sphere of politics. He lived from 1449 to 1492. He was born in Florence, Italy, and unofficially ruled Florence as part of the Medici family tradition. Lorenzo was adored by the people and called Lorenzo the Magnificent because of the wealth and prosperity he brought to Florence. He even sponsored artists such as Michelangelo and Botticelli. He supported the development of humanism, which was really big in the Renaissance, and had a massive support of the people throughout his rule. Look at him over there, looking real cute with his fancy little haircut. So the Renaissance is all about new ideas, change, and the challenge of traditional powers. And the Medici family kind of embodies this. They were a banking family that rose to extreme power and political influence through their fortune. And Lorenzo specifically ruled really through advantageous marriages, bribes, and trade deals that he arranged through the wealth of his family. He actually ruled Florence from the age of 20, and the fact that they were able to rise to power just kind of set the precedent for other wealthy families to attempt to gain power as the professional sphere kind of started growing during this time period. And Lorenzo also heavily contributed to the nepotism that plagued European politics and offices during this time. For example, the Medici family produced three separate popes, all of which were kind of more interested in aiding their family and essentially the political gains they could make from being pope rather than running the Catholic Church. So, unlike many rulers of the time, Lorenzo was truly a new kind of ruler, and no one, not even the previous Medicis, could match this. So, unlike other rulers of the era, such as Henry Tudor, even Emperor Charles V, who were attempting to centralize authority, and they, obviously faced challenges from the nobility, Lorenzo ran France with hardly any opposition from the nobles, all because he did this without behind the scenes through bribes and things like that. He was a ruler that truly cared about his subjects, and he really supported the Renaissance and saw the value of Florence becoming a cultural center. That's why he did things such as investing in architecture and artistry. Now Rene Descartes, who really contributed to philosophy, and he lived from 1596 to 1650. So he was a French-born philosopher, and he really, really pioneered deductive reasoning to prove his hypotheses. His most famous hypothesis is "I think, therefore I am," and Rene Descartes is considered the father of modern philosophy. So as the Renaissance continued, many began to challenge religious institutions and teachings, and the style of thought and logical-based philosophy that Descartes practiced was a really great model for this type of thought. So his ideas fit neatly within the teachings of the Renaissance humanists and the kind of like human and people-centered outlook of the world. So his greatest quote, "I think, therefore I am," is kind of the jumping off point for modern philosophy and this humanist wave of thinking. So Descartes has been dubbed the father of modern philosophy due to his break with the traditional types of philosophy that was being practiced at the time. He really pioneered deductive reasoning and truly believed that all problems could be solved through the power of the mind. So he didn't try to look to the divine or any kind of supernatural force, as many of his contemporaries did. And this is really what separates him. A lot of the other philosophers at the time were religiously based, such as John Calvin or Ulrich Zwingli of the Anabaptists. They were focused on reforming religions and religious thought, whereas Descartes really, really dove into that logic-based thinking and the power of the human mind. Now, Vesalius really contributed to science during this period and he lived from 1514 to 1564. He was born in Belgium and rejected a lot of the Arab and Roman medical texts that were really prevalent in medicine at the time. He performed frequent dissections of humans, frequently by dissecting criminals, in order to understand the workings of the body. And he created these really extremely detailed anatomical drawings and diagrams for medical use. His work was revolutionary, so much so that it's still used today because of its extreme detail and and accuracy, and his anatomical diagrams were so much more accurate than the texts that were being used at the time, which were typically Roman or Arab in origin. He also believed that medicine and surgery should be grounded in an understanding of autonomy and how the body actually works, which is what drove a lot of his work and made him such a great physician, because this in-depth understanding of how the body and anatomy works together really wasn't being paired with medicine at the time. So it changed the way that medicine was practiced and just made him such an amazingly skilled physician, because he was able to recognize the relationships that the body had. And he was hired to work for some of the most powerful people at the time, including Charles V, who was Holy Roman Emperor. And Vesalius was one of the first to, again, really reject the anatomical texts that were relied on. And while many ideas from this period, such as Bacon's scientific method or even Harvey's revelations about organ systems, they still function as like the basis of science as we know it today. But some of Vesalius's texts are still actually used in medicine, and that's what really makes him stand out among the other scientists of his time. And his rejection of the classical texts he'd studied to even earn his degrees is just such an example of a Renaissance thinker, because the Renaissance thinkers really looked to classical texts and ideas and then expanded upon and improved them, which is exactly what Vesalius did with a lot of these medical texts. Now, Leonardo da Vinci was a very influential artist at the time, and he was born in Italy and considered to be one of the greatest artists of all time. He produced some of the most iconic works of the Renaissance, things like the Mona Lisa. When you think of art, and especially Renaissance art, you think just simply of Leonardo da Vinci. And he was also just extremely gifted in many fields, including math and technology and science, in addition to his clearly renowned art skills. So Da Vinci's works and techniques had been studied heavily throughout history and were even influential at the time to many of the people who studied under him or just admired his work. And a lot of them have become cultural cornerstones in European history. Specifically, the Mona Lisa is one of the most famous paintings of all time. And Da Vinci drew much of his inspiration from religious and biblical texts, but he also looked to the classical civilizations and also just the wonder of human anatomy and the human brain to influence his work. And this is a truly Renaissance idea, looking to the classics and but also to things like biblical and religious texts, while celebrating this humanist aspect that is now being introduced. So he also did this in ways that were tolerated by the church, because the church was kind of in charge of art at this time, really commissioning a lot of the pieces that were created. So what really separates Da Vinci from his contemporaries is just the way that he was involved in so many different fields of study. So artists such as Michelangelo were accomplished in multiple artistic mediums, such as sculpture, as well as, like more traditional like art, like painting. But Da Vinci participated in the development of science and technology. A great example of this is his ambitious flying machines. He also developed different like water and pulley systems. And he also really studied human anatomy in depth, which is reflected in his work. One very famous thing that he has contributed to, or thing that he created, was the Vitruvian Man, which is a model of a perfectly proportioned man. And Da Vinci really worked with mathematic proportions and different perspectives in his work, again, based around math, to create these perfect proportions that he thought would be aesthetically pleasing. And this separates him from artists who use similar aesthetic techniques, such as Raphael, whereas those were based more just on aesthetic and the art. Da Vinci's skills in this were based in actual math and numbers. So Martin Luther is our overall most influential person of this time period, and he lived from 1483 to 1546. His contribution, or he was born in Germany, and just his biggest contribution is that he is responsible for the Protestant Reformation, which obviously it's only one bullet point, a simple sentence, but it is such a big contribution because the Protestant Reformation and Martin Luther's creation of the 95 Theses just really turned Christianity, Catholicism in Europe on its head. So he broke from the church by publishing these 95 Theses, the grievances with the institution of the church, and Europe was just simply never the same. It's really hard to compare Martin Luther to any other kind of all around most influential person because his effects were just so far reaching in literally every aspect of society. So we're going to go by those. So we're going to go through those one by one. So, with politics, the conflicts between Catholics and Protestants created many wars and changed state relations. For example, the French Wars of Religion and the 30 Years' War were both political, or not political, were religious conflicts. And some states and rulers, such as the Holy Roman Empire and Spain, really let religious issues guide their foreign policy. So, as Protestants became more prevalent and different Protestant denominations were the official religions of states, conflict between Catholic nations and Protestant nations really amped up, and that just completely changed the political sphere in Europe. Now, religion obviously falls under the category of philosophy, and while Luther was not necessarily the first to question the church and its authority, he was really the first one to get his message really out there and widespread. And this enabled others to create their own branches of Christianity and Protestantism, such as the Anabaptists created by Ulrich Zwingli and the Calvinists by John Calvin, obviously. And this wave of different religions could not have taken place without Luther's initial 95 Theses. And this is something else that just further divides Europe through religion. Now, with science, questioning of the church and science was happening prior to the publication of the theses, but with Luther really just knocked down that door and broke that barrier so that now people are more openly questioning the church, and there isn't as big of a barrier to science as there was before with the simple explanation of God. People are really starting to be able to get into science a little bit more with Luther's initial questioning of the church. And finally, through art, the Catholic Reformation also the Protestant Reformation sparked the Counter Reformation or Catholic Reformation, and both of these had very strong art associated with them. So most peasants couldn't read, and a great way to get the messages of these reformations across was through visual arts. So both sides would commission these large art pieces to be presented in certain ways. And so this influenced a lot of the art that was produced at the time, which can be reflected through, it can be seen in like the Baroque period, things like that. So as you can see, Luther's effect was Luther's had just such a far-reaching effect throughout European society for so long, and he touched, again, literally every aspect of society, making him truly the Renaissance man as he kind of changed the course of European history. Honorable mention, though, is the printing press, because Luther would not have been able to spread his ideas and his theses in particular without the use of the printing press, and so that definitely changed the game and allowed Luther to become as influential as he did. These are just a couple of my resources, and that is it. Thank you so much.